Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bryon Wilfert, Member of Parliament for Richmond Hill, and I'm joined by my colleague Marc Garneau from the riding of Westmount? Ville-Marie, Westmount Ville-Marie. And I'm here today to respond to an issue that was raised in the House of Commons by the Minister of Industry on Tuesday, naming me as an individual who had written the then Minister of Industry in 2006, the Honourable Maxime Bernier, with regard to the long-form census. Now, as a Member of Parliament, I have a duty, a responsibility to bring concerns of my constituents to the attention of the government. In 2006, Mr. Clement was also a member of the Conservative Cabinet. I received a response from Mr. Bernier in August of 2006, and in that letter he indicates, with regard to the long-form census, continued to be essential for providing the information needed by governments, businesses, researchers, and individual Canadians to shed light on issues of concern to all of us. And clearly, he goes on and says, although I understand the concerns of your constituents about supplying what they view as personal information, I can assure you that all of this information collected by the census is needed and is used only for statistical purposes. My question is, what has happened since 2006 to 2010 in terms of the shift of the Conservative Cabinet? Mr. Clement was a member of that cabinet. He obviously supported the position with regard to the long-form census. The letter is very detailed in terms of why the government needs this information. And this letter essentially mirrors the position of the Liberal Party of Canada in terms of the necessity for the long-form census. My colleague, Mr. Garneau, is the critic for industry, and I'd like Marc to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Certainement, si on lit la lettre que mon collègue vient de mentionner, on voit très, très clairement que M. Bernier, en 2006, même le M. Bernier qui parlait de 1000 lettres par jour, qui se plaignait contre le recensement, ce même M. Bernier disait haut et fort, c'était un champion pour le long questionnaire, que l'information qui était recueillie par ce recensement était absolument essentiel, que ça serait très difficile d'obtenir cette information importante par d'autres moyens et que, bien sûr, la sécurité de l'information était très, très protégée. Alors, on voit ici un M. Bernier qui était le ministre de l'Industrie à ce moment-là, avec qui chante une chanson très, très différente de celle qu'il chante aujourd'hui.
Yes.
Mr. Bryon, in that letter, the response that you're talking about, you actually, the letter you wrote to get that response was in 2006, and you said you'd received a few letters of complaint from your constituents who were filling out the long-form census, and you said they detail personal information they're required to fill out. They were concerned about the privacy issue. Do you remember those letters that you received from your constituents and the details of those letters?
Vaguely, but essentially it had to do with issues which those constituents felt. Maybe it was on one of them, I think, with regard to ethnic background as an example. But essentially what I was seeking from the minister was obviously clarification that I could provide to my constituents. They received the letter back. I didn't get any further comment or complaint from those constituents. But again, essentially what I am putting forth is that the position of the Conservative Cabinet, of which Mr. Clement is a member, sent this clearly justifying the long-form census. We happen to agree. We're just surprised that in 2010 there's been this quantum shift.
It's interesting because they might actually say to you that you took the same position in 2006 as they have now, and that is that you said there's some concerns that it is an invasion of privacy. So I'm curious about how you square that.
And I would suggest you name me one member of Parliament who does not put forth a letter to a minister indicating they share their concerns. Obviously, we share concerns. We need clarification. I mean, if I did not, I can tell you that whether it's a petition in the House of Commons or it's a letter to a minister, members will always stand up for their constituents. Whether they agree with the position or not, they have to take a vocal role in indicating we need to get this information.
Agree at the time that perhaps I thought you did in your letter. You said I share this constitutional
well,
concern.
Of course I would have to share those concerns. Otherwise, I don't think I'd bring them forward, would I?
You didn't necessarily mean you share as in you agree.
Right.
You were
right.
sharing physically.
And then what I did, of course,
and
then what I did, of course, when I received the response and sending them back to those constituents was to see whether or not I would get any further reply, well, obviously, the clarification which the minister of the day provided was sufficient. And I was satisfied. Otherwise, I would have continued.
So the Conservative MPs especially have said they received lots of complaints from their constituents over the time. In the documents that CBC obtained, in which your letter was also part of, there were no other letters from other MPs, Conservative, Liberal or otherwise. Yours was the only one. What do you make of the fact that there seems to be no letters sharing their concerns with the minister at that time either?
Well, I don't know. The minister of the day indicated he had 1,000 emails or more, and now I understand there's maybe 25 to 30 a year. I really don't know, but all I can say is I can only account for myself, which is when I get concerns from my constituents, I make sure that I bring them to the attention of the ministers concerned, and we make sure then we get the answer.
Comment, just as this has developed over the last, over the summer and into the fall, and you guys are obviously carrying it on in this session. What are you hearing from your constituents now about this issue? Are they calling your office saying, guys, talk about something else, we're sick of this? Or is the everyday, ordinary Canadian really concerned about this?
I've certainly not heard anything from my constituents, and are Canadians concerned about it? I can tell you they weren't in June, but the awareness today is really quite staggering and largely because of the very, very botched approach that this government took. First of all, they decided they were going to make the change before they figured out even how they were going to communicate it. And they've been playing damage control ever since that time. And I would say they've been misinforming Canadians. The example of Mr. Bernier, of his 1,000 emails a day, which if they were that important to him, because he tells us that he was even back then having his sort of Hamlet moment of agonizing over whether he should change this, and yet this letter is pretty rock solid. He's a poster child for the long form questionnaire. And then you have Mr. Baird, who gets up and says we have no business asking people about how many toilets they have in their house. That's not in the 2006 census. It's not in the 11 census, which they wrote. We've got Stephen Blaney, who says we shouldn't be asking, and I heard him on the radio, we shouldn't be asking people what they have for breakfast. And then worst of all, we have the Minister of Industry, who seriously misled Canadians when he tried to persuade them that Stats Canada was perfectly fine with the changes that they were making. We know that that is patently false. And unfortunately, there's a victim in this. There's a victim in this, and that is Munir Sheikh, who, because he's a man of integrity, felt he had no choice but to resign. That kind of behavior is totally unacceptable, and Canadians need to know about it.
And as far as your question is concerned, I have not received any complaints or concerns at the moment, although there's certainly a clear public awareness in my writing about the issue. But again, it goes back to this is the position that the government had, the Cabinet had in 2006. Mr. Clement was a member of it. Now we have a totally different tune. What is really their position? Let's be up front. They clearly, in this letter, I think really addresses the issue of the importance of the long-form census. We agree with that. We just wish that Mr. Clement would continue to echo, presumably, what the position of the Cabinet is and be upfront and honest about where this government is.
He says he changed his mind, though. He said he had time to reflect and study it, and as we reported this week, he says, I choose freedom of choice over precise data. So he's answered that. We've changed our mind, is what he says.
Well, again, I can only go by the letter that I received from Mr. Bernier. If he's changed his mind, he's no longer minister. But at the time he was minister, and if in fact there has been a policy change, the government has not explained very well to Canadians. And in any event, the nonsense about jail term and all of these things they keep throwing out, which is absolute nonsense, and yet they continue to articulate those lines. Mr. Bernier may have a change, but as minister, this was the position of the Conservative Cabinet. And again, I don't think Mr. Clement has been all that been genuine in terms of how he's approached this either, but that he has to answer that.
What do you think is going on here? They say 1,000 emails a day. You can't find 1,000 emails a day. Then there's the principal issue of the whole thing. What do you think is going on here?
It's called damage control, and it starts with the fact that the Prime Minister said, I want to change this census, and I want you to go out there and defend my decision. And it's very clear that the ministers who have come forward are having to do it. They're not doing it very well. Their credibility is shot. And, you know, they really did not anticipate that 350 very reputable organizations, you've seen the list on DataLib, have come out and said this is a dumb idea. And they're squirming. They're like, you know, fish out of water. They don't know quite what to do. I'm sure I feel a little bit of compassion for the Minister of Industry because I don't think he believes it's the right decision to do, and yet he's sticking to it, and he's looking ridiculous.
Sorry. Yeah. You say their position isn't clear when you see the letter then and what they say now. Do you think that it's a unanimous position in the cabinet or in that party? Do you think everyone agrees on this?
Well, as far as cabinet is concerned, when a minister articulates a position, he's articulating on behalf of the cabinet. And if you as a member of cabinet cannot support that, you have only one alternative. So presumably Mr. Clement supported that in 2006, but it is called cabinet solidarity.
Do you think this position today is unanimous in the party?
I have no idea, but I would suggest to you that, as my colleague has indicated, I don't know that they have necessarily the convictions, I don't think, run that deep for some of them. But, you know, they've got their marching orders from the Prime Minister and they're articulating what PMO wants. Otherwise, I guess they'd be out of a job.
There's a private members bill coming that your party's trying to put through. What are you doing to try to encourage everybody else to support that, other parties?
Well, I think very clearly, and Marc can certainly address that, I think we're hearing from other parties, obviously, support for the long-form census. I think that the 350-odd organizations have made it very clear the importance that they attach to it, and therefore I would hope that we will get support at least from all the opposition parties. And if, I know it's unusual to suggest, but if there's a free vote on the other side, then I think you'd actually have members of the Conservative Party who would support it, but don't hold your breath.
Certainly the other opposition parties are on side with us. They seconded Carolyn Bennett's bill, and I think that you know, we will push it as hard as we can. I think the most difficult challenge will be when it gets to the Senate. And will they vote freely? That'll be interesting, but we're certainly going to push it as hard as we can.
Thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup.